if you're less concerned about giving people like the ultimate customizability in the back end, you can do a lot more with your website.
Thanks for tuning in to the latest episode of Rise, Grind, Repeat. In today's episode, we talked to Henry and Steven from Eightfold. I used to work with both of them at a previous agency, where they have since gone on to start something on their own. Let's see what they're up to and dive right in.
Would love to hear kind of more of what you guys do, what types of solutions you bring to the table. One, I want to know, because as you mentioned before we were talking, there's a lot of opportunity on just pairing up marketing and technology, and I think there's so much opportunity in combining what we do together. I mean, I know that there's a lot that we deal with, that even just automating workflow and all that stuff, where it's even outside of marketing, that I'm like, man, if we could just figure out how to get salespeople notified quicker, whatever it may be, like there's a lot on the tech side that can just create efficiencies, and so would love to just kind of hear more about that. So yeah, would just love to get a kind of bird's eye view of what you guys do, what type of solutions and companies you guys help.
Yeah, so Eightfold Technology is, in a full sense, an absolute web technology company, and I'm really careful with how I present that to people, because most people hear web technology and they jump immediately to websites, and it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess in its most base form, websites is what we do, and I don't want to stray from that, because yes, we want to build websites. Like, we want that work, we want to do that work, we want to be involved in that work, but these days websites are not just simply the kind of like internet brochure that businesses have traditionally treated them as. So for us, it's evolving past websites. We need to be competent with CRM technology and how we incorporate it, marketing automation technologies and how we incorporate it. We need to understand the different workflow systems that go beyond just that initial web page. And so as we collect leads, we drive business and opportunity through e-commerce channels and so on and so forth. We're making sure that the data is being tracked, it's clean data. We know how the websites are being used. We know how the technology that's being incorporated is being used. We know what the value is. And that ultimately, at the end of the day, there's a strategy behind every selection. I think too many businesses, because websites are treated very much as still a brochure, they're thrown up too quickly without a lot of strategy into it, and then it's kind of like the strategy follows, which is a bad method when you've already spent, some companies, especially enterprise level, upwards of 6, even 7 figures these days. It's kind of this process where it's like, hey, how do we have some more strategy at the outset? Understanding that we need flexibility. Like, the web is constantly evolving and growing, so flexibility is really important, and I don't want to ever negate that. But understanding, okay, how do we take this from create a strategy that we obviously need to be able to execute on fairly quickly, and then get it to this kind of mid-alphabet, if I'm going to use letters as my kind of preferred method for demonstrating this. Let's say, how do we get it to M, which is launch for us, where we have a really good, robust technology set at our disposal, so that everything we're doing from the marketing standpoint, our SEO, our social media, platform advertising, our content production, we're tracking all of it, we're seeing the impact and the results, and even if they're small, because I think that's the problem, is we try to think of SEO, or we think of advertising in these big number terms, and it's just a volume game. But really, a lot of the best opportunities for businesses are coming within the granularity of their data. So we want to build technology that complements the use of your data, and that will amplify the effects of your marketing and all of this other effort you're putting into your business, which, too many people want to silo online from everything else that they're doing, and it's just not the case anymore. So for us, that's really what we're trying to achieve is, yes, we build your website, but we're going to help you with all of this other technology, and we have the capabilities that go right along with it. And it extends past that. Some of these organizations are like, well, can you do apps and things like that too? Yes, if the app makes sense with our skill set, we'll absolutely do work like that. It's, for me, the question results in, what does your business need? And that's how we want to start that question and that conversation and kick off a project. And Eightfold is all about that. And these are things we've learned from years of experience in the industry where we realized these types of things weren't happening. And so people were coming in with like a pre-configured idea of what they already wanted, whether that's what the salesman sold them or that's what they told the salesman, hey, here's our RFP, this is what we want built. And then you get into the minutia of it, 6 months in, and you're like, okay, this wasn't properly fleshed out. No one asked this question internally, and the answer is usually no. And it's like, okay, well then find a good technology partner to co-opt that whole process with you. Even if you pay them initially as just a consultancy, make sure that you're getting an idea of what you need to achieve for your business and how can that be reflected in your online technology and what you're showing customers and if you're even B2B other businesses, things like that. So for us, that's kind of the essence of what Eightfold Technology is. We're a technology company built with marketing and advertising in mind and the ability to expand upon that even further. So we don't want to just get pigeonholed like some organizations do as like, oh, we're just a really good website company. Yes, we are. We pride ourselves on that. Our websites are absolutely designed to the best practices of the day. They're fast. They always load fast because we know that's of extreme importance, especially with mobile technology and the importance, of course, of data consumption, data use. We know that these are things that, the big technology companies are pushing out there as like, hey, this is what we'd like to see. Why? Because they really do want a better internet. Now, whether or not they're doing some practices that some people don't like, that's not really the discussion point here. They really do want a better, more efficient internet because they know at the end of the day, that's going to give users a better experience. And as a business, I don't care what you're doing. If you don't have a web presence that gives the user a good experience, you're losing customer opportunity. And I always simplify this to even the most basic businesses that I think of as like super local, super homogenous. They don't really do much else, but the one thing they do, which are restaurants, not restaurant groups, just a singular one restaurant. If you don't have a web presence that tells people what's on your menu, what are the dietary things that we can cater to, what are we trying to appeal to in terms of what we produce, good platforms out there for those businesses, there's no excuse. So that's kind of the message we're trying to deliver. It's like there's no excuse anymore. Have a strategy, know what your consumers and users are looking for, and meet them there. So that's the gist of it. That's a lot. But
there's a lot that was said that's super awesome. So I mean, it sounds like you take a different approach rather than getting an RFP and saying, hey, we could do this. Basically just taking orders. It sounds like you take a step back and more of a consultative approach and really, what is your problem? My question would be, as a business, I don't know what my problem is. How would you go about, I guess, there's a lot that can be done, CRM, tracking, website, there's a lot. And so how do you go about figuring out what is the most value? Because I mean, it sounds like a lot of this is gonna be a 6, 12, 18-month relationship and a lot's gonna be done. So how do you prioritize what a business needs if they don't need it? Or they don't know they need it?
Yeah, what they don't know is always kind of the big question, right? Especially in the middle of the road businesses, the businesses that are 100 plus employees, but they're not these juggernauts who just have infinite data to kind of pull from and see where their problems are at. So a lot of these guys come in and they say, well, we have, and this may not be the nicest term to describe it, but it's the truth. We have a blind spot. We don't know what we don't know. Can you help us figure that out? And the answer is yes. Because there is a wealth of data and resources available to organizations, especially like ours, and we know where to pull from, that can help us find where you're missing opportunity. So for us, it's just a matter of, let's sit down, let's talk about your business. What are your business goals? What is your business strategy? If you're a growth-minded business, how do we help you grow? If you're a business that's like, hey, we want to maintain, we know we're going to be growing at some point in the future, but right now we just want to make sure we're meeting our consumers, our users, where they need to be met, then we start to talk about that. We start to map out, what does the business do? How do they go about doing it? And then we start to look at their users and consumers and we say, okay, what are the competitor set doing? What are people that have like businesses doing? If there's not a direct competitor set, we can just say, hey, 1-to-1, we matched you up. We start to look at what are the things that they are doing and see the types of things that have success and we rate that. And we say, okay, here's how you prioritize a technology stack. And I think that's an important differentiator, because we always think of a stack as like a very development phrased idea, but a technology stack is actually more than that now, and it's for marketers, it's for developers, it's for executives. It's everything from like data visualization platforms all the way down to literally like what's the base for the code you've built your web products on. That's your technology stack, and I think that's why the idea of a really relatively new field, although it's been around for 20 years, marketing technology, MarTech, that's why that's becoming a burgeoning field. And MarTech is really all about answering those questions, which is when you sit down with a business and they say, we don't know what our problem is, how can you help us if we don't even know what our problem is? We start to go in and look at and define a problem. And it doesn't always have to be problem driven. Sometimes it should be opportunity driven. It's not, hey, we don't have a problem, our business is doing great. Okay, is there more opportunity? Are you interested in assessing, could we be doing better? Because some businesses, yeah, they are doing great, but it's always that question of like, are there ways we could be bettering how we're approaching our market? And the answer is yes, almost always. There's very few companies that I think can just write things off and say, it doesn't get any better than this for us because we do everything we need to do. I think maybe one industry gets that pass, and that's oil, because it's pretty hard to get into the oil industry. So you can give those guys a pass, that's about it. Does that kind of answer the question of problem?
Yep. So, I mean, because everything that I've been thinking of, it's more marketing technology. And I know you mentioned that a lot, but it sounds like you just take a step back and, all right, business, what is your overall process and workflow? And then you just kind of listen. And to your point, you're not finding problems, but problems are opportunity. And it's not so much, this is your problem. Like, you guys are killing it as a business. You guys are this large. You guys are, been around for this long. Doesn't mean that there's not opportunity left on the table. And so it sounds like you guys just kind of audit what a business is doing in the day-to-day process, their entire workflow on how the different departments communicate with each other, how the website talks to people who visit, how they're tracking it. And so it sounds like you're just listening to that and along the way saying, oh, well, we can piece this piece of technology to help with this. We can free up 100 hours a month by bringing this technology in, and so it's really just and that's why now I'm seeing why it's so difficult to really say this is what we help with, because each business has a unique problem, or each business has a uniqueness in terms of what they're leaving on the table, and so it really does take that audit process. And so what are some of the types of the questions that I guess you would ask a business to help identify some of those areas of opportunity in which they are leaving opportunity on the table?
So for us, that fundamentally comes down to a pretty simple initial question is, what is the business and what is the size? Like, what is the scale? So when we sit down with a business and we start to kind of probe those questions, it becomes what are you currently doing and how are you doing it? And what is the size and scale, and where do you envision yourself going? So those are real base level. Usually you can get those questions knocked out in the first 10 minutes. And once you get that basic idea of what is it that we're doing and how we're doing it, then it becomes, how many managers do you have to have? How many kind of hands in the pot do we have going on? What is the cadence at which you're trying to update content and push things out? There are questions of, is the website treated as a very stagnant thing, or is it a very active, constantly in motion thing? And where can we create efficiencies in terms of management and things like that? Another thing that we like to dig into is, how many third-party platforms are you relying on? That's a big one for us, because I think a lot of people are finding themselves now hamstrung by these third-party platforms that they rely on too heavily, so that they don't have, and a lot of times that's because they don't have internal resources who can do things like throw up splash pages instantly. So they get caught up in this cycle of this platform as a service usage system, and they think that I've got to have these technologies, when it's really like, can we trim these down? Can we create some efficiencies? Can we better use what you already have at your disposal? And can we find some ways to reinvigorate how you're approaching the web? Now, obviously, these are bigger companies with more scale, but we can even simplify that down to smaller organizations. It's like, oh, well, we're producing a blog. Well, what are you doing with your blog? Do you network it? Do you have it integrated? Can you syndicate it somewhere? How do you use your content, and what's being done with that content is often a question even smaller businesses, 50 to 100 employees, aren't really answering for themselves. And so when we begin to kind of scale that system for them and break out that conversation into like where we can help, how we can amplify their efforts, that's really what we're trying to do. We're asking them the detailed questions of how things are being used and why they're using them, and is that really a best use scenario? And we're not even saying like, oh, you need to get rid of all these things. It's just, can we use them more efficiently? Say that again?
I said I might say that sometimes, depending on, you know, once you get in there and start looking at all of that stuff that's loading on a website too, you know, that's another discussion to have with people where it's like, okay, you have 7 different platforms. Are you actually using all 7 of those platforms, or are you just, you know, an agency put them on 3 years ago and you guys forgot about it?
We found that out with heat mapping tools. The sheer number of companies running heat mapping scripts, and I'm like, when's the last time you looked at what's actually running in there? I don't know. And that's a shocking response. And then another thing, the sheer number of scripts I've seen on companies' websites from old display networking partners or data providers that they're like, oh, we haven't worked with them in a couple of years. And I'm like, well, why is their script still on your website collecting your users' data?
And even that,
get that stuff
outside of that, how does that impact the website? Like, just, I mean, they're enterprise level websites have been on where it's like 88 scripts. I mean, 100 scripts are loading, where to your point, maybe only 10% are actually being used. How much does that actually impact an overall website?
I mean, it could be a huge amount depending on how those scripts actually get loaded in. You know, one of the things that we first start telling people, you know, if you're using GTM or Google Analytics and you're not using GTM, like you're in a bad spot from the get-go, right? Because GTM, they went out of their way to make sure that script loads the way it's supposed to, and then loads any script after that essentially the way it's supposed to. But what we've found is a lot of sites, you go in there and a lot of those scripts just get hard-coded in a header or in a footer or somewhere. And that's not good, especially if you have 70 different scripts loading and you're only using really 2 of them. I mean, you could see page times increase just off of loading external library scripts like that, which is not good. I mean, it's...
And so that simple little fact right there, I mean, just from a page load speed, I mean, Google recommends 3 seconds or less, and they even say every second after that negatively impacts your conversion rate by 60%. It's like just one little area of opportunity. Hey, you're not using these, let's get rid of them. You can have a website now load 4 seconds faster, and what I would say is, to a business, what happens if you convert 3 times more just because you have 3 times the amount of people actually seeing the content?
That's actually something too that I think in the context of this exact discussion, we'll want to provide a link to users to, is something we've pulled across is, I think it was Walmart, did some research, and then they worked on cutting load times, and it was literally adding percentage points of increased revenue for the amount of time saved. Do you remember the exact number?
Every 100 millisecond improvement they saw a 1% increase in revenue.
Yeah, which equates to like...
literally 10% revenue increase for 1 second of load time speeds.
It's funny. I know that exact stat you're talking about. One of our first podcasts was like the importance of page load speeds, and literally used that exact stat. And
WPO Stats has all of that information, and a lot of different companies have put together information on how page speed has affected them and their business. And that was definitely one of like the bigger ones where it was like, wow, like if Walmart's seeing that much of an improvement, like we need to make sure that every website we build is.
Mm-hmm. And it just goes to show how much power or value you guys bring, because that's something small and simple that's a quick fix. Now imagine what happens whenever you just automate an entire company's process. How many man hours would be saved, and how many more? I mean, you could be saving a company thousands of hours a month by, I mean, these things are getting missed, these things are falling through the cracks, they're late here, by giving everyone an insight. And there's a lot of things you can do from a technology perspective where this small fix could literally save millions of dollars. Imagine doing a full-blown audit and just...
Well, I think it's important for like you as a company to go through and audit those scripts every once in a while and say, hey, like, what are we actually using? Because I don't want to just say wholesale, like get rid of Google Analytics, get rid of Hotjar, get rid of Crazy Egg. Like if you're actually using those to better your website, to better your product, and better engage with your users, then by all means keep them on there. But just make sure they're implemented the right way. Because there's just so many of those sites out there that have so many of those scripts loading. And again, like we've dealt with a lot of companies thus far that have had a lot of scripts, and they're like, we don't even know if we're using that anymore.
Yeah, like to your point, it's if you're actually using them. So A/B landing page testing tools, they're going to slow the site down a little bit, but and we just talked about how increasing the speed impacts conversion rate. But it's like if it's going to load a half a second or a second longer, but that conversion rate, you can get it to improve by 80%. You know what I mean? The performance that you're going to get from it outweighs the.
One of the things we've learned is there's a give and take with just about anything on the internet. It doesn't matter. It could be a design feature, design system. It could be the tracking scripts. It can even even just be the CMS of choice. There's going to be a give and a take. Like if I had it my way, in Henry's ideal world, and I know Steven would even disagree with this, but like everything would be flat file. We would just do code. You don't need CMS. Like that stuff drives me nuts now that I know how good and efficient you can actually make websites perform. Hold on, just let me finish. All I'm saying is in my ideal world, I'm like, that's how it would be, because like all of this weighty stuff, but there's business solutions that are being served by having that CMS. There's a lot of other things that you need for content distribution as to why those different programs exist. So yes, there's always an important give and take. And I'll never advise someone like you just said, like Google wants that 3 second or less. Well, they're like, well, we're going to lose this and we're going to lose this. And I'm like, yeah, so Google's recommendation, while great, is now null and void because you have to have those things.
Yeah.
Like they better your business. Don't sacrifice your business to make Google happy.
Yeah.
And because some people do, they get caught up in that cycle of just like, oh, it's kind of like, I don't even know what you'd call it, but the penultimate of technological achievement is Google. And
best practice.
Yeah, like what they say to do is what we should be striving for. And it's like,
meanwhile, YouTube scores like a 12 on the page speed insights. So like, let's not get carried away.
Their own products aren't even meeting their own products aren't meeting their requirements. So it's all well and good what Google's putting out there, but at the end of the day, everyone knows sometimes it's not always realistic. And sorry, you can go ahead and knock down my whole CMS commentary.
Yeah, I was actually going to kind of piggyback on that point because you kind of brought up A/B testing on landing pages. It's 2019. We can build landing pages that are A/B tested without having to use JavaScript on page, right? Like we can do that on the network level. So when people hit your website, they get a request and they get sent to a B or they get sent to an A, and you don't even have to worry about that page speed.
Just blew my mind.
Yeah. So like there's solutions out there for all of this, and to piggyback on Henry's point with the flat file stuff. There's ways to build, WordPress and Drupal on top of a flat file static site generator now. So like if you're less concerned about giving people like the ultimate customizability in the back end, you can do a lot more with your website and you can make it a lot faster just right out the gate. It's just a matter of, okay, how important is that to you and how important is that to your team? Do you want them to be able to change every facet on that page? Well, then, yeah, you're going to be stuck with a CMS that's a little heavier handed and it's going to take a little bit longer to load that page. But if you're less concerned about that and you just want to get content in front of people's eyeballs, a flat file static site generator is going to be the way to go.
And again, that's where we take the technology side of this and we consider the business needs and agenda, and we make that kind of the important actor in how we build out what we build. And that's what we always want to do with things going forward is consider that business need and requirement, and then where is the business going from a business goal standpoint, and then we try to meet them there with the technology that we're trying to provide. And it's always, again, not just what Google recommends, but like where are the industries going, where are the standards of everything, and are we building products in things that other people can use? Because it's no good if someone's like, check out this really sweet technology product, and I won't get any quirky nonsense words put in there, but it's not good when you have someone that approaches you with something and no one else knows how to use it. So like we try to make sure we're a part of the gold standard of what people are very familiar with, what's currently being used, and there is an age out rate. Like people go, well, how often should I have to rebuild my website? And I'm like, well, as often as your business requires it. Yeah. And that's the truth. Like, I don't have a better answer for you. It's as often as your business requires it. For some businesses, that might be every year. Yeah. Reshaping things, reconfiguring things. But like, I just saw, the new LinkedIn splash page before you sign up for LinkedIn. That changed probably for the first time since I signed up for LinkedIn in 2009. I mean, it's always been that pretty generic, like checkered image collage thing that they'd had up there. I mean, maybe little tweaks here and there, but seeing that change that drastically, and you hadn't seen a very major change in a long time, that just tells you that's where LinkedIn felt like, well, our business doesn't need this part of it, which probably was wrong, but that's at least what they thought. And a lot of businesses tend to think that way, and I just say always, like, keep an open mind, keep exploring, and see where your business might be benefited from a technology change or a website update or whatever it is that you need to do to benefit your business. And for me, keep it simple like that. You won't ever get into this overly nuanced, like, what's the next best thing? And it's more just about, like, are we doing the things we need to be doing? Yeah. If the answer is yes, then, okay, is there anything we could do to create the efficiencies? Because there's always that. And then you can move on that. And if the answer is no, it's obviously okay, then we need to explore what our next steps are and how we achieve a better version, or a good version at least, of what we've currently got. Which a lot of businesses, they don't even have a good version. So I don't even, I get people that come to me and I'm like, whole new thing, like erase it. Let's start with a clean slate. That's a good thing about the internet, is you can actually get away with that a little bit, and it's not going to ruin everything you're doing.
You need to rebrand a whole.
No.
Yeah, it just takes time.
Yep. So that is kind of, again, we bring everything always full circle. Doesn't matter all this great technological advancement that we can get to and how great we can make the design and how fast the thing runs. Is it still getting those business needs met? That's the important thing, and those conversations need to constantly be brought back to the forefront. You don't want to lose sight of that, and I know you mentioned timeline 6 to 12 to 18 months. It's like, yeah, but as a technology partner, we should just be with you there constantly.
Yeah.
Like you shouldn't not, just like your marketing partner, you want to hear from them weekly, bi-weekly, whatever it is. Your technology partner shouldn't be that guy you call when the website's down or when you want a new page, once every 3 to 4 months. Like, you need to be engaged with them. If it's benefiting your business, that your web presence, be engaged with your technology partner. Know who they are, know what they're doing, how can they help, especially if you're spending money in marketing and advertising. Any partner should be like, here, talk to this technology team. Make sure you're getting what you need, so you're not like, hey, we can't track this, or hey, this page is really slow and it's hurting our ability to convert. That should not be an excuse. When I hear businesses say that, like, oh, we don't have the ability to fix certain things, it's like, why? Because I know there's people out there that can fix them. So let's start the conversation. Like, that should not be an issue. So from that viewpoint, it's, again, being in contact, being in touch with people, and not being that sort of an organization that's like, developers, it's so strange. Like, what do they do? It's like, you know what we do. You can see it. It's written all over the internet.
Dark web.
Yeah, weird things like that. The dark web.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. The how often should I change my website? How often should I change campaign? We hear it all the time on the marketing side. How often should we change our keywords, our ad copy? And it's to your point. It depends on your business needs, and what I would ask is, do you have any insight on I guess what types of things should someone look for to know that they're ready for that new website? You know what I mean?
That's the easiest thing to answer. Of all of the questions we've had is like, when do we need to do it? Well, there's 3 things. There's advances and updates in technology, pure and simple.
Security plays a big part of that one.
Security too. So it's not just the facet of like this device like revolutionized how we look at websites. I mean, it really did. That was one of the biggest advancements. Yeah. So when you consider the mobile device, like that, suddenly now everybody's websites needed to have a mobile component, be mobile friendly, and now we want it to be responsive. We needed to change between a variety of screen sizes and device types. So that's one thing, is the advances in technology, and like Steven mentioned too, security. I could bark about this all day long, security, because most people don't have any forms of security on a lot of what they do with the websites. So, I mean, that's where you hear these things of like, someone's big company's website got hacked, and it's usually like a password-based issue.
Yeah.
Something simple and stupid that could have easily been prevented, but the rollout should be across the board. Like, you shouldn't have flaws that are easily spotted and easily repaired anywhere. So, again, talking to organizations, that should be a part of any technology team's audit. If his website is down for a month, he could literally create a revenue qualification and just say, look, this is what I've lost. And that's pretty shocking. I mean, yes, there's always a chance like, the website doesn't work, here's their phone number. But still, that's an inhibitor. Once you have an inhibitor in place, that person bounces because your website doesn't work. They go to the next guy on the list, and they dial them. If they really wanted my dad's company, sure, they'll find a way to get in touch with him. But at the end of the day, like, that's not the average user. The average user is just going to be like, all right, on to the next guy.
They're like, their website must not be working. Like, they must not exist as a company anymore.
That's the other thing. A lot of businesses, even like mid-sized businesses, the assumption is, I don't see who you are. You probably aren't here. Great. Yeah. Great. You went out of business. And so it's really important to maintain the security, to maintain the updates, to not have downtime, and to not let that be an excuse. And that really is on you. Like the stuff that we just talked about with Google, that's not on you. There's nothing you can 100% do about it.
And I was going to say too, like they obviously have SLAs, like service level agreements with all of their higher end clients. You know, people like Netflix are paying astronomical prices to AWS to ensure that the servers that they're paying for exist all the time. So there's obviously ways that you can mitigate like that server level problem. But then going back to your point with updates and everything else, and yeah, you know, if you find out a year from now, as we do, we currently know Magento 1 is going out next year in June. And you're on Magento 1 now, you need to start planning for that transition. Like, so there's things like that where it's like you need to start thinking about things before it happens, before it's 2 weeks out or before it's a day before, and you're like, oh my God, what are we going to do?
Yeah, your product fails and then you are out. Because, an e-commerce platform goes out. That's going to take months to get set back up and rebuilt properly. So your business is just gone during that period.
Yeah, which without a partner that's constantly looking for when are updates coming, what are the impacts it's going to have, it mitigates that the week before. What do we do?
Yeah, when is software end of lifing? Like that's obviously a big play in the internet anymore. Is you have to constantly be up to date with everything on your server, on your front end, whatever, to keep up with security. And obviously, some of the stuff that gets written, you know, they can't support it forever. You know, they support it as long as they possibly can, and then they give you that end of life date, and they're like, all right, this is it. Like this is the last day you're getting security updates. So you need to make sure that everything that you have on this platform is upgraded to the next one.
And because so many SMBs are on WordPress, like you have to realize that that doesn't just apply to just WordPress, like plugins, things like that, all of that stuff that goes with those bigger, more robust platforms that rely on a lot of different little components. You have to keep those updated too. And I can't stress that enough, because I can't tell you how many times people are like, well, I keep my WordPress up to date. You go look at their plugins and there's like, they haven't touched it in over a year. And I'm like, dude, this is funneling like your e-commerce component.
Well, we could go into an entire podcast about WordPress and WordPress related plugins, but I think that's like another.
That would be a fun one.
That's another important question where it's like, all right, plugins are not inherently bad. Like that's what makes WordPress so great, is it's so extendable. You can put in all of the things that you need to do. The problem is so many people go out there and they're like, oh, install the first one I find in this WordPress search results. And it's like, okay, you just installed a plugin that hasn't been updated in 4 years, and like the author is just MIA. Yeah. So like you definitely want to make sure you're careful about which plugins you're using. And to Henry's point, just make sure you're updating everything constantly.
Yeah. The other thing I would touch on from our business view standpoint is like all these little integration components. I mean, all of that stuff can be priced out. That can be done hourly. That can be done in a way that it's like, okay, well, I don't want a whole new web product. Can we work with what we got? And what can we do with it? And it's like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot you can do with an existing product. Even if it's not great, there's a lot you can do. It doesn't have to have, you know, a $50,000 design on it to be, you know, a truly well-working product for a business. And I think that's where some people get hung up, is they're like, oh, I want this product, but everybody's like, you know, this is what you need. And it's so overly designed that they get afraid to pull the trigger on getting a new product out there. And for us, I mean, we can work with what you've got. We can plan things out until you're ready to pull the trigger on that full new product, and figure out what do you need from it in terms of design. You know, does it need to be an award winner? No, but it needs to look good and function well. The experience, the interfacing needs to be good. You know, because I get people all the time, they're like, oh, does it have to be a six-figure type of a dollar figure to build a really great website product? And my answer is always, no, it doesn't. But it needs to fit your business need. Yeah. So like we can do a lot with 15, 20 grand, but at the end of the day, if you come to me and you're like, well, I want to do all of this, and I throw you the price, like that's what it is. Like I don't have a better answer for you there. Like we can do something for what you want to spend. We can do something. But if we want everything, okay, then we got to talk about what does everything cost. And I'm more than happy to break that out for people. And I've done it quite a few times. And some people walk away a little disheartened and they're like, well, that's a bummer. And I'm like, well, bite off what you can chew. Start somewhere. The worst thing you can do with the internet and online world is just go, well, I can't have it all, so I'm not going to do anything.
And do you guys help? It sounds like you guys can help with the phased approach. And all right, well, here's your budget. How do you guys go about that process?
It all depends again on the need, but typically, you know, unless you're e-commerce, which like out the gates, I always direct people to really simple solutions if they want to try to have an e-commerce platform, but they can't spend a lot of money on it initially. And usually those simple solutions are self-managed. Those are things like Shopify or using WordPress and using a WooCommerce type plugin. And the only reason I tend to say it's direct them to something like that is you can do that for a lower upfront cost and let it build to where you do eventually need a more robust platform. But there's not really a middle of the lane system yet. It's either you do need to plan on spending well for e-commerce or manage with something simple and just know it's going to have a lot of pain points initially. Because I can't tell you the number of people that use those platforms and they're like, I like it, but the pain points with trying to use the out-of-the-box solution are just a lot. And it can become very arduous to manage. And you always hear the bigger complaints too, is like a lot of them just aren't that like SEO friendly, and as I'm like, that's part of the kinks of like managing it, and then of course as you add more SKUs, as anyone knows in the e-commerce world, like those things become unwieldy. Like it's just very difficult to take care of.
I mean this can come back to WordPress and WooCommerce in general too. So we could save that for another podcast.
Right, and we probably should revisit that. But to me, it's like we can help you with a phased and scalable approach so that you can get something out there and start working for you from day one. And sometimes, like I just tell people, like, it's a 6 to 10 page website that has some forms, that has some contact information, tells people what your business does. It's well designed, it's fast, it performs. And I've still had some people balk at like, 10 pages is going to cost me $12,000. I'm like, yeah, but everything is now built into it that adding pages is not as expensive, and so it scales quickly for a lot less upfront cost, and so people still kind of hear that and they get a little bit shocked, but I'm like, but everything you've needed to do is now there, so now we just need to just add on to it, and it's definitely an efficient and affordable thing to add from there. Like once you have the base work done, the groundwork set, it's the concept is there. Now we just need to build on top of that.
And I mean, to your point, I mean, we kind of take the same approach when it comes to marketing. It's like, here's all this. Don't just walk away because it's big. Let's just figure out how to cut this out to where basically find the lowest hanging fruit so that we can show some value, get some revenue coming in, and build upon that. Exactly. So it's awesome that you guys don't push away from people that aren't going all in. I mean, I think that's huge as well.
As long as, and I mean, my biggest thing too for that is we always talk about those three components, cheap, fast, and quality. Like those, you get two of the three, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how I always want to try to break stuff down for people too, is like, we can do that lower cost product. It's going to take us a little bit more time because we can't always prioritize you over everything.
Yeah.
And plus, we just need a reasonable amount of time to discuss things to get you down to that kind of like, what's the best thing I can get for right now for the budget that I have? Well, then let's talk about that. What is that? And what are you going to walk away happy with so that you continue to want to work with us to grow? So we can kind of grow in tandem. So we always want to kind of help set that groundwork well, and that does take a little more time, and I always recommend that. If you came in, dropped a huge budget on me, and you're like, I got this huge project, and we need it done in 6 months, like, yeah, we could do that. But that's the key. Huge budget, 6 months, and here's what we want.
You gotta pay for time.
Yeah.
You gotta pay for time. I mean,
so as long as there's that recognition of the people we work with, it's fine. Like, we will find a way to work with you. Like, I'm never gonna be that guy that's like, oh, you only have 15,000? Can't do anything for you. Yeah. That's not true. We absolutely can do something for you, and we can still turn out something that's awesome.
You might not get Google.com for $15,000, but
it's not. Yeah, we'll do it. It's just, here's what you're going to get for that, and it's a more realistic. It's just, I mean.
But honestly, the businesses that have started with that approach are now making gains with us, and they're growing with us, and they're happier. Because they started out with something simpler. Yeah, it wasn't everything they wanted, but they're getting it to where it's like, now we're investing more money and we're building out the product and it's doing more for their business. They're happier.
Yeah, I absolutely love that approach, because then I see too many times where just people push and get people to invest more than they're comfortable with, and then all of a sudden it increases the expectations in which they need to see a return on, where it's like, instead of just pushing them, let's figure out how to work with what they have, and then they're more comfortable, it builds up that partnership, it builds up that trust, and even then it's not like you have to get results that much faster because you didn't push them off a cliff in order to do it. And so I think it's just
I'd rather you understand what you're buying and the price you're buying it for than to sell you on something that you don't understand, but you think you're getting everything you want, and then you get at the other end of the tunnel, and you're like, oh, just spent all this money. It's not what I wanted, and here I am now with a product that I don't fully know is going to do what I want it to do.
Yeah.
I don't ever like that at all, because I've watched it too many times, ruin relationships, screw up their business and their approach, and now they're soured. And we've brought in a number of clients here that have come from that.
It's almost better to get that.
We threw all this money into this, and now we have this headache on our hands, and we're pretty bummed out. And the trust is like, I'm having to rebuild trust that I never broke in the first place.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, from like a development standpoint too, like that was probably one of the biggest takeaways from previous agency experiences is dealing with kind of that veil agencies like to pull over people's eyes when it comes to technology, and like the fact that all of this is kind of black magic to your clients, when in reality it's not, right? Like, you're paying me for my expertise, but I'm not going to hide that expertise from you.
Yeah.
I want you to know what it is we're doing and why we're doing it, and I think that plays such a huge.
You don't need to know how to code.
You don't need to know how to code.
Explain what it is.
But you need to know what it is you're paying for and what it is we're doing. And I think so many companies out there like to just, they're like, oh, we'll take your idea and we'll run into the back room with it and spend the next 6 months building it, and you'll get your product when we're done. And that's just not the way I want to build products. I want people to know and understand how they're getting from A to Z.
And that extends to apps, because like that's the next great mystery in like online technology, is like everybody thinks they want an app. They don't really know why. They don't even know how it'll benefit their business. But businesses are investing a lot of money in those areas, and like I'm watching people build apps. They have no clue how the app is actually built, and then they're like mad because the end result is not a product that does the things they're needing it to do. So then they're trying to sell something to customers that's not doing what they know it needs to be doing, but they're pushing it out to customers, and then this product is generally, it's not broken, but it's problematic. And then they're finding, now the cost to keep it updated and to roll out new features is getting astronomical, and it becomes just this very heavy thing to manage. And between troubleshooting and bug management and DevOps, and then separating that out and then building out new features, this becomes an unmanageable product. And so this is where you see a lot of apps languish, because they haven't had that strategy put into it, where it's like, oh, like Steven said, the black magic has gone on, and here's this product. And it even may look good, but it doesn't do what you need it to do. So the functionality is just not equitable. You're not meeting the user at their user need.
Well, and I think too, especially nowadays, I mean, you're definitely running into a lot more app fatigue. I mean, I use maybe the first screen on my homepage mostly, and the rest of these apps are
that's a lot.
one-time use things that I'll use once a year for something. But it's getting to that point where you're trying to grab attention away from companies like Netflix and Hulu and Gmail and everything else that's constantly sending you notifications on your phone like, hey, we have new stuff, we have new content. Yeah. How are you going to compete with that unless you're spending a lot of money behind your app, unless you know exactly it is what you're trying to get your users to do inside of that app? Like, do you really need an app? I think is an important question that a lot of people are not getting asked.
Well, because if someone comes to you and says, hey, I need an app, you say yes because I'm going to get paid for it. Yeah. And it's like, you could easily, to me, it's like, okay, well, you have money to invest somewhere. I mean, and then it's taking a step back and do you really need it? And it's asking those questions like, hey, you think you need this, but you really need this. And you're being a better steward of their overall money. And it's like, a lot of people think that they know what they want or need, but in reality they don't. And so it's like, I love that approach because again, it just builds that trust and you're creating that long-term value, and no, it's awesome.
Yeah, I hate to be the type of an individual who steers somebody or an organization away from what they think they want. But at the end of the day, if like we revisit the strategy deck, 10 times over, and the strategy is telling me you don't need this, I'm going to move them away from what they want, because I don't want to see someone buy into and come out the other end on a product that they're like, it's unusable. Mm-hmm. Users will not adopt it, and there will be no a future opportunity, even if we add features. A lot of organizations don't understand that. And my bigger focus in the next 10 years will probably be on applications for B2B, because there are so many now I mean, just in our industry alone, you got to consider the sheer number of products to like help you manage your time, help you manage the project in general, help you manage the design, help you manage this, that, and the other thing. You know, most of the organizations like ours are probably, 8 to 12 apps deep by the time they're fully up and running with everything we've got going on. So
You want me to go through the list?
no, I don't want to hear about it. It's obscene is what it is. And most of those products you pay for. And so for me, it's like, I'm always questioning, I'm like, do we use the features in all this? Because if we're not using all the features, can we find something that does most of what those 2 or 3 apps are doing and do it in just one? And that would be my advice to any organization that's like, I think this would be great. Can I integrate it and can I use it? And the question is, does it actually do the things you are really wanting it to do? Yeah. And if it's not going to, can we achieve some of that with the website, with the things you already have at your disposal, and roll it into that? Because there's no reason to move it onto this device if there's nothing that it's going to do.
Well, and it could be, wow, we roll more features into your website at half the cost or a third of the cost or a fourth of the cost instead of you building an app.
Yeah, especially if it's a once a year use case scenario. It's like, why spend all that money? So I'm just going to go to that app once or twice a year.
Well, and especially how quickly, Apple and Android like to move. Android a little bit, maybe less so, but iOS definitely deprecates like a lot of their features pretty quickly. And if you're not updating and paying attention to that stuff, Apple will ding you for it and they will kick you off the App Store. And to spend all of that money and then, 2 or 3 years later, just lose all of that money you spent because you didn't want to continue updating it. That's a tough pill to swallow.
So I think in kind of just a summarization, a neat way to package it is like, we are a technology company that can do a lot for online technologies. We've even kind of ventured out of our comfort zone on a number of different projects and looked at things that aren't necessarily exclusively online technology. But that is our wheelhouse. That is where we like to be. That's where we like to meet customers and meet businesses and sort of create a partnership around is like, what are you doing online and can we better that? And that includes all of the online touch points. We want to know, what are you doing with your products and could it even work with, Alexa? Is Alexa able to communicate something if someone asked about your specific brand? Is there something online that can help even facilitate that communication through Alexa, through Google, through Siri? So anywhere and everywhere when it comes to online, we're trying to meet and help businesses ascertain that level of competency and then also just knowing a strategy. And we like to give like documentation behind almost anything we do so that they know this is what we did, this is why we did it, this is how we're going to move forward. And a lot of companies don't even do that part well. Even if they build you a product, they're still just like not sure even how they came to the end result. And that's a bit scary too. So we don't even want to do that. Like we're trying to make sure every base is covered in terms of that technology process. So that way when you marry up your marketing and your technology, like they just seem to be this one cohesive working machine. And there's no question at the end of it, like, what did we just get? And that's how I feel too many times. You watch people walk away from that table of a signed agreement and you can see this kind of like, I don't know if it's worry, but this kind of hesitancy as they leave, like, I hope that's going to work the way we're thinking it's going to work. Like you want to have them leave confident that they can go back to their bosses, or even better, I love the age-old adage, can you explain this to your grandma? Like not entirely what we do. We can't, like it is more technical than that. But at the end of the day, I would hope that whoever it is, even if it's the CEO of an organization, he could take that document, walk out of that room and go explicate to their wife, to their husband, to their grandma, to their grandpa and say, this is exactly what I just bought. And I'm super confident that it's going to work for us. That's a good thing. That's a good feeling. That's a self of rest assuredness that you want to instill in customers. Again, going back to this throwback of my dad being a roofer, like you want to know that guy just got up there, fixed that, and the ceiling's not going to come in on you the next time it rains. Like that's the kind of a self assuredness that you want to have when you have someone work on something for you, and you want to know. Even though I don't fully understand what it takes to make sure that my roof's not going to leak, I want to know that the job that they did is the correct job. They explained it to me. They told me how they're going to do it. I'm confident that it's going to be fixed. And that's what we're trying to say. We want you to be confident. It's like, okay, this makes sense. Strategically, it's sound. It's got my business goals in mind. I understand what they're going to try to do and how they're going to go about it. I might not know all the nooks and crannies. I might not know all the levers being pulled, but I know what they're going to do. And we want that kind of assuredness to be the thing that everyone walks away with.
Love it. All right, so as we kind of start wrapping up, this has been a lot of high level, awesome stuff that, I mean, most businesses get excited about. Are you guys able to dive into a use case scenario where a business came to you, here was the problem, here's how you guys thought it through, and able to speak into any of the successes that they've had? And so it's how have you applied all this stuff that we're talking about in terms of automation, CRMs, all that stuff, so that people can kind of see what was executed on and how it's impacted an overall business?
Yeah, I mean, because of the technologies that we're using and how we're cross-applying them, I'd like to use two big examples. I can't name them by brand, obviously, just because of the different agreements we have in place with them. But one of them is a major national restaurant chain that had a lot of issues with their online data. The information that was coming through wasn't lining up with what a finance team was seeing based on what the platform reported and then the actual real sales numbers. So they had this divergence between multiple systems. The data from the platform was not accurate to what the data that was actually coming in the dollars and cents from the stores, to what the online system was reporting, to what was being collected in the analytics. So they were just like, more importantly, like, there's gonna be a little bit of they talk about the bell curve. There's going to be a little bit of variance.
Yeah.
It's expected.
Yeah.
But you don't want to see
40%.
No, I mean, even 5%. Like, as a financier, you don't want to see a 5% discrepancy from what your online platforms are reporting and like, okay, but this is what the restaurants are saying we got. So what's going on? Like, why is there this discrepancy? Like, how is there extra? How is there less? You don't want to see these kind of wide-ranging discrepancies. And they were seeing some of those discrepancies, and they said, okay, we need a serious cleanup. And so we did. We went in, we took a look at everything, complete thorough audit that was going on in the background. We looked at the platforms, and these are third-party platforms that are provided by big international solutions companies. So it's not like these guys are, they're not new to the game. These guys are big time players, and one of them, oddly enough, even acknowledged, hey, we know that this is a problem. Here's a company to fix it for you. We're not going to do it, but here's a company that can. And it's kind of like a backdoor handshake deal, like, hey, these guys will fix the problem that we know exists, but we're not going to do anything to resolve it. So we came in and we worked through the steps of resolving that, cleaning up the data sets, cleaning up the tools that were even gathering the data. Took a lot of weight off the website and created a resolution, which is a much more cleaned up data set and the ability to have insight into, if there is variation, why do we think we're seeing that variation? And is it enough variation that we need to be concerned? Or is the variation considered with what is considered within normalcy? Now, I didn't make all of that decision in terms of what is normal, what is not, what variation is acceptable, what is not. But are we able to track it, and are we able to qualify it, and are we able to internally then use that data to make better decisions? And the answer was, like, now we know what channels are reporting what. Before, they were just like mixed up across the board in Google Analytics, and then the platforms didn't even fully understand, because that data gets passed through a variety of systems that are on the website that we have to better for their use. So all of that was cleaned up, and the end result was, they were successful, and they now actually have a process and onboarding system that we drew up for vendors and additional partners that they, of course, will be incorporating over the next several years. I mean, and this is how this company works. They are an in and out type of company. So vendors are constantly coming on board, and now they have a process, a document that says, hey, whatever you need on the site, you need to explain it. We need a time frame for what it's going to be on there for. How soon do you need it? What marketing systems are we pairing this with? That way we even understand something as simple as, like, we need this new data layer for the Facebook pixel. Okay, why? What's the purpose? What are we pairing it with? So that's one really specific example that turned out really well. Just a complete data cleanup and the ability to now understand what are we seeing, which again impacts your marketing. Because if your teams can't see like what their marketing is doing, how can they optimize? How can they better that service?
You allowed multiple touch points, including the stakeholders in the business, to just get better insights and make better decisions.
Correct.
Overall, that's going to make for a better bottom line.
Correct. And again, like, a lot of these organizations, they hire a vendor and they're just assuming that them fixing things for them is just part of the package. And it's like, well, no, we're hired to create the campaigns, put the campaigns into the platform, and then run the campaigns and optimize it. And the problem is if the data that is collected through the various online resources you have, it doesn't even have to just be your website. If that data is inerrant and it has issues, well, then I can't properly optimize. So then you start to do this shooting in the dark system that I think a lot of companies get down the road in, and they don't know how to make better decisions or how to better optimize. And worse, the next set of campaigns that comes out, they're like, well, they'll just try something new because why not?
Yeah.
Nobody can tell us what we did wrong or right the last time, so let's just do this for the heck of it. So we don't want to do that. So we recommended Drupal as a solution for that. And a lot of what went into that is, the multi-levels of management. You get a lot more role control. And then, again, too, this multilingual capacity. If your business is going to need to have something in multiple languages, that is something that needs to be considered absolutely up front. That management system that will need to go into that. And Drupal is a great product for that. And I don't know if you want to kind of add or ad-lib in something to that from that standpoint, like what that actually equates to and means.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of Drupal's biggest successes really is that multilingual support that comes out of the box. It's probably the most well thought out system for multilingual use. WordPress and Joomla have some additional plugins you can get out of, and add in there, but it's not a great solution. And Drupal really considers that like a first class. We need to make this a priority because we have so many different countries and people and authors and everything else that goes into creating multilingual content like that we need to make sure that it's a first class citizen on Drupal. And they definitely have done a really good job of doing that. And on top of that, I think Drupal is just a good platform for enterprise-like organizations. There's a lot of enterprise support there. There's a lot of, development. I don't want to say goodwill because Drupal definitely has had some bad will over the years. But it's definitely considered a very strong enterprise CMS level system. Unlike WordPress, which is kind of more like we can make it an enterprise solution, but it's not really built for that. It's not really built for handling.
And the other component with Drupal that really made a lot of sense to us too is that there are other areas of support that come with Drupal that have Drupal in mind, like hosting services. And I'm not going to get into the brands because there's a million hosting organizations.
I'll get into the brand because I think it's important to recognize Acquia as the stalwart company that they are, if only because their CTO is the guy who created Drupal, right? So they're an organization that takes a very Drupal first approach because the guy who's running their technology is the guy who created Drupal.
But interestingly too, they also will help you from a hosting standpoint if there are issues within the code, if there are security flaws and problems and concerns, and you don't get that out of a lot of hosting companies. Most don't ever want to talk to you.
So if you write like a custom Drupal module and have that on the Acquia platform and run into some kind of issue, they will actually have someone from their team go in and look at that code, which, like Henry just said, is not a normal thing for a hosting company to go in there and do. Obviously, you're going to pay for that, but it's probably one of the better solutions out there if you really are trying to run an enterprise level system like that.
Yeah, and that's something that we consider as a part of what we do. So you go and engage with an organization that can build quote unquote an enterprise solution for you, but they don't consider all those types of things. They're just like, well, yeah, we're just going to put you on the generic hosting that, Jim and Mary who have, JJ's Diner down the street on as well. And I've seen that. I mean, We've gotten into products and I'm like, here's a website that gets millions of users a month hosted by the same organization that's hosting literally a website that gets 50 users a month. And yes, there's scalable hosting packages you can buy, but at the end of the day, no one obviously considered what is every piece of the puzzle being put into this, and is it really truly an enterprise solution? And sometimes it's not.
Well, and again, I could go into probably a multi-hour discussion on WordPress. But I had that conversation with one of the other developers here where it's WordPress is not really designed in such a way that it really scales infinitely well. It can scale. You can make it do the things you need it to do. And like I said earlier, plugins make that a good solution for a lot of people, but it's not the best solution for enterprise level stuff. It really isn't. And a lot of that comes down to just the way that they built out WordPress. You can't do things really easily manage it under Git. You have to go through a lot of different roundabout ways of getting that into some kind of version control software or use an offshoot of WordPress that another company built out.
And this is development management, right?
Yeah.
So when you're talking about a higher end, higher dollar product, you don't want it to be more difficult for your developers to manage if the development requires a team. And so when we work on stuff as a team here, we try to not get stuck into products that from a development standpoint are really difficult to manage, and my developers are like pinging me upset about something. I don't want to hear that, you know? So like,
It's an annoyance and takes time.
yeah, so when he's phrasing it that way with how we use our management protocols for the development and what's required in it, it's like you don't want to get stuck in a system where it's like, well, I know I'm going to have a development team. Even if you want to like help outsource part of the product and you have your own internal developers, which will do that type of work with teams, you don't want to be like, well, we're going to be on WordPress. And it's like, well, you have your development team in, Houston, and then you have your marketing team in Florida, and you're going to work with us here in Arizona. That's going to be problematic. Like, you don't want to be stuck on a platform that's becomes really difficult and arduous to manage, and do what he's talking about doing.
And there's ways to obviously mitigate that again, but it's not a solution that's really super well thought out unless you're starting from the get-go with something like, I'm afraid to name drop code related things because I don't know how interesting that is to people. But unless you're starting from the very beginning with an idea of like, hey, we want to make sure that this is manageable for every developer that comes on board. A lot of WordPress things are not built that way. Somebody gets an idea and they're like, oh, go create a GoDaddy account in 5 minutes, create a WordPress, add a theme, we're good to go. And that's honestly how a lot of WordPress sites get developed, and there's nothing wrong with that. But once you start adding in, like Henry said, you start adding in different teams across the country, you start adding in more and more people to development, that becomes a bigger issue, until you take a step back and you're like, wait a minute, how do we make sure going forward that this is the right way to go forward? So I think Drupal and I think even Joomla does a little bit of a better job than WordPress does on that. But I do want to talk further to that Drupal decision was also based on the fact that they had an existing Joomla site, but nobody on their team could manage it. So anytime that they wanted to add additional content, it was like they had to go through an agency and they had to wait months at a time to get a new page added because nobody knew how to do it, or it was too complicated inside of Joomla. So we took a lot of that complication out when we built out the backend for the Drupal CMS, and we're like, hey, we're going to build this on modules that are pre-existing, that are really well supported by the development community and by us, and give you the tools you need to be able to create the page as quickly as you need to, but still within the bounds of the theme that we're going to co-develop with your team, right? So we set up a design language and said, okay, like here are all the different components you can use as part of a page build out, and then you guys can go in there and add whatever components you need to that page and have it done. And I think ultimately that worked out really well for the team that we were building it with.
I mean, yeah, a little bit of upfront work, and now you just create a template process for them, which then now saves them hundreds of hours over the year. So
well, and money, because let's face it, developers are not the most cost-efficient resource available to organizations. So it's like anytime you're going to have to engage a development team, whether it's pulling them off of something that really does need to be a priority because you have to reallocate to get something up because it needs to serve marketing and it interrupts the entire workflow of a team, or you have to go outsource and pay someone an hourly fee to build out, maintain whatever it's got to be, it becomes a cost efficiency scenario where it's like, if you already have marketing people in place and all they need to do is just go update a CMS to get a new page up, perfect. As soon as you have to then double that team workforce to get something done, the marketer who has everything they need to do what they need to do, but they have to then give it to a developer who has to do additional work, suddenly you're now doubling the work process. And usually it's not even that simple, because the developer will push back and say, well, I don't see how this works within our design framework, so we need a designer involved, because I'm not going to just wing it, because I know that ultimately what I spit out is going to frustrate whoever is the marketer is. The marketer is going to come back and be like, well, this is unusable. I don't want this page on my website. this is hideous. And the developer's like, well, I'm not a designer. What did you expect? So now you've got 3 people involved. And once you've got 3 people involved in most organizations, someone goes, where's the project manager? So we're trying to help people like get it to where a single person can make a decision, get some content up on a website, serve a marketing goal, and move. And that's an important thing, especially, again, we're talking about an enterprise solution, but this applies to, mid-tier businesses. Yeah. If you're the kind of organization that's got, 100 plus employees, you're doing 2 to 3 million plus a year in revenue, and your website contributes to that, how are you managing your ability to get stuff up on your site? And is it super difficult? Because that's a problem, and we're trying to help alleviate that. So that's a great case study right there. And I would have loved to have been able to use their brand because they're awesome, but and they're a good team and a good organization. And honestly, like, I think they made a wise choice in pursuing this route because it's going to make it better for them in the long run. But any organization can follow those exact steps. It doesn't have to be Drupal, but they can follow those exact steps to get to that same result. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, as we wrap this up, would love to, what's one piece of advice that you guys can give any mid to large size business in terms of what to look for and take a step back when it comes to their just technology stack?
For me, it's something fundamentally so simple, and I know Steven will have his own thing, but for me, when I talk to an organization, I'm super upfront. Like, 1, don't ever just get one proposal, get more than one, and 2, if you don't understand what you're trying to do, and no one in your organization obviously has like a really clear understanding of what you're trying to achieve, don't be hesitant to hire a consultant, even if all that consultant does is looks at your proposals and tells you whether or not they're garbage. Because I've seen way too many proposals come across people's desks for big dollars, and they're just like, well, I don't know what's in this proposal, I don't know if this is something I can really qualify for my organization. They end up signing something, and 6 months down the road they're in a whole mess of a situation. So for me, it's vet. And, I don't too often get into the habit or the trouble of consulting with people to look through proposals. But honestly, it only takes me a few hours, and then the majority of my time is usually spent helping them decide, okay, well, then what do we do? But honestly, it's worth spending, $1,000 to $1,500 if you're going to spend, $20,000 to $30,000 plus to have someone vet your proposals. So don't hesitate to spend that money if you're going to build a technology solution. Anything that's big in scope, have someone vet it for you, have someone make sure that you are going to get what you're needing out of this product, so that way you're comfortable moving forward. So again, there's plenty of guys that really know this stuff out there. It's just a matter of asking around, but get a consultant to help you vet those proposals. Don't just ink a deal if you don't know really what the terms of that deal are, because I find more times than not, people wind up with a situation on their hands where either that organization oversold themselves, or that organization didn't bother to fully clarify exactly what they were going to get. And so all of a sudden there's all this like, oh, well, you want that? That's another $5,000. Oh, you want this? 10,000 more here. And that's where organizations become really frustrated with a technology partner, because they're like, well, why didn't you tell me? Like, I needed all this extra stuff. And it's like, well, part of that goes back on you. Like, make sure that proposal is understandable and that you know what you're getting. Yeah. So vet those proposals. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, just piggybacking on that, just strategy in general is such an important thing to have when you go into any kind of project. What is your goal with the project you're trying to develop? Are you trying to inform users? Are you trying to sell a product? All of the stuff that you do after that point should support that goal. And to Henry's point, that RFP, that contract should support that goal as well. And if it doesn't, you're going to be in a world of hurt later on. But as well, I think one of the things developers like to do is, and I'm guilty of it too, is getting distracted by the new and shiny, right? It's the framework of the week.
Really guilty of this.
It's the framework of the week. It's the SaaS product of the week. It's that kind of stuff where we're like, oh man, like this would be really cool to integrate. But you got to take a step back from that for a minute and be like, okay, does it make the most sense for the people that you're working with? Does it make the most sense for the company that you're helping build out that technology platform for? On the flip side of that, don't be discouraged from looking at new things, right? Like you don't necessarily want to pay $100,000 a month to Salesforce if you don't need Salesforce, right? Like you want to make sure that all of the things you're implementing for that particular project make the most sense for that particular project. And developer support behind any of those things is going to play a key role in making that decision, I think. Too many times in a previous agency, they made the decision to go with a CMS platform that most people probably have never heard of, and I think that's going to set you up for future failure when it comes to teaching people how to use the platform and everything else. So many people are used to WordPress, so many people are used to Drupal, so many people are used to Joomla, so many people are used to, Site5, to BigCommerce, to Shopify, to WooCommerce. They're used to these platforms, and to give a marketer a different CMS and be like, have fun, like that's going to set them up for failure too. So you want to make sure that all of the things that you're choosing to use and develop on make the most sense for the people you're developing it with.
Our industry is plagued by one very specific thing, and it's age old. It's the age old marketing relationship status, which is like advertising and marketing was really based on creative capacity 60 years ago, your ability to be really truly creative and create something that really caught people's attention and hooked their eyeballs to the situation. So everything was very handshake relationship based, and trust was established and broken upon that. And in our world now, there's still a lot of that going on, a lot of handshake agreements, like, this was my buddy, he owns this company. Do I know if they actually can do anything? No idea, but work with them anyways. So there's that mentality. There's that mentality still. But what we are really trying to help people understand is like that mentality is going to hurt you, because you're going to lose good people. You're going to chase talent away with that mindset, because those people are going to be like, well, that team gave us what we have and it doesn't work and I don't know how to use it, and nobody asked me what I know how to use. You hired me because of my expertise, and now I'm working with someone that's got something I've never dealt with and I'm just expected to get on board. Sorry, I'll go find another job. You'll chase away talent. You create inefficiencies. You create products that are unmanageable. So I think as our industry evolves over the next 10 to 20 to 30 years, you're going to see the emphasis on like, this is my buddy, work with him, start to kind of taper off. I don't think it's ever going to go away, because people want to work with people they like. Like, that's just a fact. You want to work with people you like, period. Like, it doesn't matter how competent people are sometimes. If you hate that person, you're not going to work with them. You're just like, nah, this guy's, I can't deal with him. The personality, whatever it is, the behavior, some things like that, that's problematic. So I think our industry will see that begin to taper, but at the same time, it's like, I think what it should be reestablished with is like, yeah, this is my buddy, but here I know what his competencies are. Yeah. My team wants to help vet this because I want to work with you guys, but I want to know that you can do what we need us to do. And so I think that ultimately is kind of the future. You're going to see those two things married up a little bit better, because we don't want to see some of that cycle continue on. So Anyway.
No, this is great. I got a lot of insight into what more you guys can do, and I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity and synergy for us to work together for sure. There's a lot that you guys are discussing where I know that we could figure it out, but it's not our lane. And so, there's a lot. You guys are going to bring a ton of value just to a lot of businesses, and would love to just remind people who you guys are, where they can find you, and
Cool. All right.
So go ahead and remind people who you are, where they can find you, social channels.
Eightfold Technology, that's the business's name. You can find us at Eightfold.io. It's one of those more unorthodox technology names. And you spell Eightfold out, EIGHTFOLD.io. If you Google us, don't click on the Eightfold.ai. That's a completely different company. They have an HR software. We don't do HR. You can check us out on LinkedIn, stuff like that too. We did technically have the Eightfold name long before these guys ever came along, so I'm just going to throw that out there. It just wasn't in the full operational effect. I had it since grad school. So we're just look for us online. Know that we're business-minded people too. I think that's important. If anybody ever feels the need, you can just reach out to me directly, Henry at Eightfold.io. Super simple. Spell my name the very traditional English way, so there's no confusion there on how to get a hold of me. I do respond quickly, promptly to everything, so I'm always happy to talk and chat with whoever. And that's things too, is like, if somebody comes through because they're genuinely interested in what Eightfold does, I've always got time for a person like that. Even if we don't end up getting to work together, I still think that enlightening people and better educating people is really important in this industry. because you never know when that handshake comes back around someday in your future and can benefit mutually everybody. So honestly, I don't ever consider it a waste of my time to just talk and see where you're at and what I might be able to do. And hey, if I point you down the road to someone else that I know that can benefit you, perfect. It's all the better for everybody. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out.
Love it. Community over competition.
And if you want to get real technical and nerdy, you can always email me too, Stephen at Eightfold.ai.
Yep.
Awesome. Appreciate
Cool.
the time, guys.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it.